Here we are in the Wild Harmony Farm kitchen. I'm Ben. This is my dad, Kip.
Hi.
And we're going to show you how to break down a whole chicken into all the parts.
Really?
We've got the whole chickens here. I thaw them out. My favorite quick way to thaw a chicken is to just cut a small hole in the back of the bag and then put it in a pot, and I just fill the whole pot with water. But the way to really speed it up is to make sure that there's water going into the cavity inside the chicken. And so that's how we thawed these out. You can do it. You can thaw a whole chicken in, I don't know, probably 4 hours on the counter if you do it this way. So it goes pretty quick. If it thaws too quick, I mean, what we did. So I did this yesterday. Then you just dump the water out, and so you can stick the whole pot in the fridge, and then it'll just be ready whenever you're ready. So there's always going to be a little bit of water in there. I'm going to dump that back out. Take the chicken the rest of the way out of the bag. You can do the same.
Do I have to do that?
You have to do that.
All right.
You dump the water out. And we'll get this out of the way. And so there's, depending on how we have the birds processed, sometimes the neck or some of the organs will be inside. We usually will make stock out of those. I usually do this whole process in my kitchen sink, just because it's easier to clean up. But I thought with the two of us, it would be a little bit easier to do it on the counter. So the first thing I do is I grab one wing. I kind of like hang the bird by the wing. Ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to find the joints in between all the bones, and because then we don't have to cut through a bone with a knife. So you can tell if you're moving the wing around, you can kind of tell where the joints are, and that's basically what we're trying to get the knife into that spot, so we don't have to cut into a bone. So I'll take the knife, and then I'm basically going to cut kind of straight down into the chicken and all the way around the base of the wing. And if you do that, before you even get all the way through, just get through most of it, then you can actually identify, there's the end of the wing bone. So you cut through it a tiny bit, but that is basically, yeah, you're kind of right at the end. So now you can just, once you find that space between the bones, then you can cut it off really cleanly without having to go through any bone.
Cool.
Same thing on the other wing. Just hang the bird by the wing. Knife kind of straight down all the way around that joint until you can identify where the end of that wing bone is.
I beat you.
And then while we have the wings, why don't we just do the wings? So again, if you want to separate the pieces of the wing, this is called the tip, which we don't usually eat, but we do make stock with it. This is the actual wing, and this is called the drumette because it looks kind of like a little mini drumstick. So again, there's flexibility when you bend the joints. You can kind of figure out roughly where to put the knife so that you're cutting through the least bone possible. The wings, there's no way to entirely avoid the bone, so you do somewhat cut through the bone. But basically, right where it's bending, we want to stick the knife kind of right on that spot. I do that, and I just push down really hard with the whole blade of the knife, and it'll go through. And there's two bones that are right next to each other, and ideally, you're gonna miss one of them. So this
would have been better.
That would be the perfect spot. But you're always gonna cut through one, because they don't meet in exactly the same place. They overlap, so you're either gonna get like this joint or that joint. So that's how you get the drumette off, and then the same thing separating the wing tip, you can feel where it's moving. Stick it down, put the flat part right there, just push down, and again, you're basically trying to get one of the joints clean cut, so that there's like a clean end of the bone, and you got it too, right there. So you did as well as you can do with the wings.
So why does one want to do this? Because normally you have an entire chicken wing just to eat.
I mean, this is the way that you get them. You know, if you go order chickens in wings in a restaurant, they're already separated like this. It's just a little bit easier to eat because when they're still connected, my experience, anyways, is you have to stick your face like in the middle of them, and you end up getting it on your cheeks. So I think it's just a little bit easier to separate them.
The other advantage to cutting out all the parts is you can get more seasoning on more surface and more crispy skin.
Cool.
I feel like that's like my favorite reason to do it. It'll cook a little bit faster too. So these are large chickens, so they might take an hour and 15 minutes if we just stuck the whole thing in the oven. If we part it out, it's probably going to take 35 to 40 minutes to cook.
Cool.
So we can do the same thing with the other wing. Find where the joint is. Cut right through there. Yep. Take the tip off. So those are our wing pieces. All the extra bones I also keep, and they just all become stock. So then the same thing, we're gonna try and find where the joints are, where the drumstick attaches to the thigh and where the thigh attaches to the rest of the chicken. So if you hold up the chicken, there's all this loose skin between the drumstick and the breast. We wanna just cut the skin without cutting the drumstick. And you'll see, as soon as you do that, it really opens up, and you can, at this point, you can open it up so you can actually see a seam right there. Usually the seams between muscles are there's gonna be like a line of fat on there, and that's kind of one indicator that that's a seam, but in between muscles. And so I'm gonna teach you my second favorite part of the chicken is called the oyster on the back. I like to keep this on the thigh. It's in my opinion, it's the second best part of the chicken because it's kind of like embedded in the hip socket, and so there's bone almost all the way around it, and whenever meat is in contact with bone, it holds flavor and it holds moisture, and so I want to make sure that I get that piece out. And so the way to do that is you can stick the tip of your knife, just the tip of your knife in, and kind of carve. Yeah, you're gonna carve down. You can see it. You can see the chunk of meat right there. That's what you're gonna try and get. But there's bone right behind it, so you can't get the knife in very far. But that'll keep it on the thigh. Yep, just like that. And then you can cut right along that fat seam. And I just kind of do it really lightly because it'll as soon as you cut just a little bit, you can bend the thigh back, and it'll kind of like dislocate, and then you can figure out exactly where the joint is. Yeah, you feel how that it kind of broke backwards.
Yep.
So now you can just release right along the bone right there. So what did you do? So you left a little bit more of the bone on, but I would cut right there to leave this part of the bone, which is kind of like it's part of the internal cavity, but you can cut, you can feel the bone right here. You can cut right above that, kind of lightly, and it'll separate off of that. What I've done, you can see it here. Mm-hmm. It's separated off of the bone, and then you can see the joint down in there. This is the end of the thigh bone, so I'm in that. Yeah, you've already done it too. Mm-hmm. So you're in there too. So then I flip it over at that point, so you're looking at the skin side, and there's only a little bit still attached, and you're just going to cut that last little bit, and you're just kind of cut. You're not cutting through bone at this point. You should be cutting right next to the bone. Yep.
We typically sell, if we're selling the parts, we sell them as a leg quarter. If you ever want to just split this part, I'm going to show you that now. And again, if you bend the two pieces, you can figure out, stick your thumb in there, you can actually feel the ends of the two bones.
If you bend them back and forth, you feel where it is.
What's so?
So that's where you want the knife. There's a little seam of fat right next to it. Even if you cut at that seam, you're going to be pretty darn close. And then I try and, the other end of my knife, I want like kind of in the, I don't know what you call that, like the crotch between the drumstick and the thigh. So find the spot in between the two bones, stick one end of the knife right there, the other end of the knife right at that crotch, and then you can cut through. And when you do that, if you get it right, then you're right at the end of, right at the end of that bone. So you didn't end up cutting through any bone. You could cut through a tiny bit right at the end of the thigh bone, but you can get it pretty darn clean so that you're not having to cut through any bone. So you got a thigh, a drumstick. We'll do the same thing on the other side.
So I'm not clear if this is correct. If there should be meat here, or should I have
ideally none, but
that would have come with a.
You can leave that on the thigh.
Okay.
And this is the kind of like part of the oyster. You got some of it. It's really hard to get all of it.
Right.
But you can get a pretty good amount of that off of there.
Okay.
Why don't we do the breast next? So the breast, again, there's a seam of fat right there that's right at the edge of the breast muscle. So we're gonna cut kind of lightly right along that seam. You don't have to cut in very far, and you'll be able to feel the rib cage right underneath it. You can feel that bone that's right underneath that fat.
Mm-hmm. And
then keep going right along that bit of fat that's right there. So that you've kind of released the breast muscle at this point. And you're gonna, the other end of that cut, so one end of the cut is all the way back to like the point of the breast. And the front end is where we just took the wing off. So that's right, you're gonna cut basically right up to where the wing was. This part, once you've got that all released, you can actually you can much more efficiently get the meat off if you do it with your thumb. So you want to separate the meat just with your hand off of the rib cage, and including this is actually the breast muscle, and the tender is that piece under there. You can leave them together if you're really careful, but they do naturally come apart from each other, and all of this you're just going to do with your hand. So I just work my thumb all the way in there, just trying to separate the meat from the bone.
Two pieces of meat right next to each other.
If you want them separate, you can easily get them separate. So that's as much as you can do for the breast by hand, and then the tender, you can get that whole thing off just with your hand.
Fascinating.
The part you can't disconnect by hand is right along the keel, which is like the center of the breast. That part you do have to cut. So once you get...
So should I be getting this now?
The way you've got it, I would take the tender off. So get your finger
and is that what
underneath
chicken tenders are made of?
That's chicken tender. And you'll be able to pull the entire tender out just by hand. And then it comes out really clean. There's no meat left over. The entire tender comes out. The breast, we do, so I'm doing it just to show you the difference. I'm leaving the tender on. You can, right up at so you actually broke the wishbone. I usually cut right along the wishbone. I leave that intact because it leads you right to the keel. And then you've already taken your tender out. I'm just going to release the tender on this side and then cut right on the keel and just through the skin, basically. So I just make a cut right into the keel, and that's going to split the two breasts. And the bone is right under the skin there, so you can't really cut very deep. Once you've cut through the skin, I just grab the whole breast and hang the bird. And then you can feel with the knife where the keel is, and you can cut right along the keel. So you're not cutting bone, you're just releasing
Right here?
the meat. Yep. Just releasing the meat from the bone. So this is actually the other breast that you're cutting into. So this is a breast with the tenders still connected to it, which sometimes we'll just grill them just like that, especially if it's a smaller chicken. We leave the skin on because I think the skin's the tastiest part. It's really easy just to pull it off at this point if you want it off.
And my understanding is that organic skin is okay for you.
It's even better for you. It's got all the good stuff in it.
Cool.
Yep. The reason that I think that we often learn that the skin is not good for you is that there's a lot of fat in the skin, and some people are afraid of fat, but this fat is good, and any fat is going to collect the toxins. But since our chickens aren't exposed to any toxins, there aren't any toxins in it.
So in a factory chicken, it's full of toxins.
Yeah,
And you want to get rid of it if it's a factory chicken, and you want to eat it if it's not.
exactly. It's got all the good stuff. There's the breast, one breast, and so we can do the same thing on the other side. Again, you see the fat is showing you where the edge of the muscle is. And so I just cut kind of lightly down through that fat from the tip of the breast muscle all the way up to the wing. And once I'm in just a little bit, I do the rest with my thumb. Again, is the wishbone is right there, so I'm gonna cut right along the wishbone. I just let the knife kind of glide right along the wishbone. That leaves the most meat on the breast.
Chicken tenders coming up.
Once I've got the breast meat all disconnected on the other side, I grab the whole breast again, kind of feel where the keel bone is with my knife, and just glide right along that bone. And then you get the whole breast off.
You hear that?
Yeah, you broke the wishbone again. Did you wish before
Dang it.
breaking it?
Forgot.
You will get better at it, but ideally, there's not really much meat left there, and whatever meat is left there is going to be. You can trim off the last few little bits and cook that depending on how you're cooking it, or I usually will just stick that whole thing in the stock pot.
But
and
you
make
want to trim
stock
the
of that.
oysters.
I do love the oysters. So if I accidentally didn't get enough of it, I'll take that off. The last thing is my favorite part of the chicken, which no one ever talks about, and I don't know if there's really even a term for it. I'm sure there is, but I don't know what it is. But the shoulder blade of the chicken is right there, like on the back, just behind where the neck is. There's like two little chunks of meat that are kind of buried underneath the shoulder blades. And so can you feel where they are?
Right here?
Yep. Yeah. There's two chunks of meat there. I have finally learned that it is possible to get it off as one piece of meat. It's not very easy. But I'm gonna figure out like feel where the edge of the bone is and where the muscle starts, and I'm just gonna release the muscle really lightly from the bone. And you don't get too far in before you this is the shoulder blade right there. You feel a bone that's kind of floating
I think so.
right there. So I just with the tip of my knife cut all the way around that bone. It's a very flat, small bone. And you can release. Now you can really see that bone. That's the shoulder blade. And then there's meat underneath, around, and in between the shoulder blades. You're a step ahead of me. So you took one side of it off, which is fine. I'm gonna do the other side.
But you get them off in
I
one
get them
piece.
off as one piece just because we almost always grill when we part out the chicken, and so it's a little bit easier to keep the meat on the grill if it's in a bigger piece. So again, I'm just kind of like with the tip of my knife cutting to release the shoulder blade. And then what's left, I got the shoulder blade on both sides. What's left is this chunk of meat that I can release. Again, I don't know the term for this. If someone knows the name of it, let me know. But this piece of meat never makes it back into the house. It comes off the grill and goes right in my mouth.
Oh, no kidding.
It's the best. I think it's the best. It's like a whole bunch of skin, and all of the meat was like surrounded and encased by bone, and so there's just tons and tons of flavor in it.
And you don't worry about all these little extra pieces.
It depends how you're
doing
cooking.
it. Okay.
I mean, if you're gonna cut it all up into small pieces in a stew or something, I mean that would be really easy.
Yeah.
If it's a big enough chunk that it's gonna sit on your grill,
Right.
you could cut it off. Otherwise, I'm not worried about it getting wasted because it's gonna be extra nutrients in the stock.
Got it. Cool.
This part, I mean, if you are grilling, I suggest sticking. If you're gonna make stock, what's left here, the carcass that's left. If you're gonna make stock out of it, I suggest just throwing that on the grill too, because it'll brown it and it'll make the flavor of the stock a little bit richer. So that part and the wing tips, I grill them anyways. They don't have to be grilled any particular amount, but if you get them just a little bit browned, the flavor of the stock will be a little bit richer.
Cool. Thanks.
That's it. Thank you.
I'll shake your hand.